On a cold afternoon, a hungry girl tries to steal a bag of bread, overwhelmed by guilt and need. Caught by a powerful businessman, she tearfully promises never to do it again. The man, moved by her dignity, offers help and begins an unexpected transformation. If this beautiful story of overcoming hardship and love interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. The rain fell mercilessly on the narrow streets of the Whitechapel district in London, turning the asphalt into dark mirrors that reflected the lights of the lampposts and the few establishments still open on that June afternoon. The cold cut like a blade, seeping through thin coats and the gaps of poorly closed windows in the old buildings that characterized this region, marked by time and inequality. Laura Walker walked with quick steps, almost running, her soaked trainers making a wet sound with each contact on the ground. She was only 12, but she carried a weight on her thin shoulders that didn't match her age. The navy blue coat she wore, inherited from some old donation, was torn on the left sleeve, and the thin fabric offered no protection against the icy wind that blew between the buildings. She was trembling, not just from the cold that penetrated her bones, but from the fear that grew inside her chest like a hungry shadow. Her small hands wrinkled by the rainwater, tightly gripped a transparent plastic bag. Inside it 4 still warm bread rolls, stolen just minutes before from a bakery 3 blocks away. Laura pressed the bag to her chest, as if that gesture could protect her from the guilt that was already beginning to eat away at her from the inside. Her brown eyes, too large for her small, pale face, were welling up with tears. They were not just tears of regret. It was the pain of knowing that her mother, Mariana, was at home, lying in the only bed they owned, consumed by a fever that hadn't broken for 5 days. They lived in a tiny flat on the 5th floor of a building with no lift on Tobin Street. It was 2 cramped rooms, with peeling walls and old furniture that seemed to tell stories of other families, from other times. But Mariana always kept everything clean, organized, dignified. Even when there was no food, even when the electricity bill threatened to be cut off, she never let poverty steal their dignity. Laura stopped for a moment under an awning, trying to catch her breath. Her breath came out in white clouds in the cold air. She looked at the bag of rolls, and the tears finally streamed down, mixing with the rainwater that dripped from her dark brown, straight, and poorly cut hair. She had never stolen anything in her life. Mariana had always taught her that honesty was a non-negotiable value, that poverty was no excuse for losing one's character. But that morning, when she woke up and saw her mother delirious with fever, when she opened the old, noisy fridge and found only a moldy piece of cheese and half a tub of expired margarine, something inside her broke. Hunger was an old companion. Laura knew well the feeling of an empty stomach, a weak body, the dizziness that came when she went too long without eating. But seeing her mother like that, hearing her low moans during the night, knowing she needed food, medicine, strength to recover, was too much. So Laura left. She walked through the wet streets, the rain turning the world into a grey blur, until she reached the corner bakery. She stood outside for long minutes, watching the comings and goings, smelling the scent of fresh bread that escaped through the door whenever someone entered or left. That's when she saw her chance. The bakery owner was distracted, serving a customer at the counter. The assistant had gone to the back. There was a basket of rolls near the door, almost on the pavement. Laura entered slowly, her heart beating so loudly it felt like everyone could hear it. She grabbed the transparent plastic bag that was on the counter, put 4 rolls inside with trembling hands, and ran out. No one shouted after her. No one chased her. But that didn't ease the guilt. On the contrary, it made everything worse, because now she carried the weight of that act alone, without even the relief of being confronted. Laura took a deep breath, clutched the bag to her chest again, and started walking. She needed to get home, needed to give those rolls to her mother, needed to see her eat something. Later she would think about what to do. Maybe she could go back to the bakery another day, when Mariana was better, and pay for the rolls. Yes, that's what she would do. She would save every coin she could get until she could return what she had taken. But as she hurried down Manning Street, her head bowed, Laura didn't realize someone was watching. Edward Williams had just left a meeting in central London. He was 46, the owner of a chain of restaurants and real estate investments that had made him one of London's most respected businessmen. Tall, with an athletic build, maintained with discipline, well-groomed greying hair, and clothes that exuded success, Edward was the kind of man who commanded attention wherever he went. That afternoon, however, he was tired. The meeting had been long and tense, full of numbers, projections, and weighty decisions. He decided to dismiss his driver and walk a bit before getting his car. He liked to do that from time to time, to feel the city, to remember where he came from. Because Edward hadn't always been rich. He had grown up right there, on those streets of London's old East End, the son of a factory worker and a seamstress. He knew the struggle well, the disguised hunger, the wounded pride of those who work hard but never seem to get ahead. His social ascent was the result of hard work, a few well-seized opportunities, and, he admitted silently, a bit of luck. It was when he turned the corner onto Manning Street that he saw the girl. Laura was standing under an awning, the bag of rolls clutched to her chest, her small body visibly trembling. But that's not what caught Edward's attention. It was the expression on her face. It was a mixture of desperation, guilt, and fear that he recognized immediately, because he had felt the same thing many times in his childhood. He slowed his pace, watching. The girl started walking again, but something in her posture, in the way she held that bag, made Edward realize that something was wrong. He followed her from a distance, driven by a curiosity he didn't fully understand himself. Laura turned onto a side street, entering an even more run-down area. Buildings with grimy facades, cheap shops, people rushing to escape the rain. That's when she tripped on a loose paving stone. The bag slipped from her hands, falling to the wet ground. The rolls tumbled out, soaking in a puddle of dirty water. Laura let out a muffled cry of despair and quickly knelt, trying to gather the rolls back, wiping them with her hands as if that could save them. But it was too late. They were wet, dirty, ruined. Laura remained there, kneeling in the middle of the pavement under the rain, holding the ruined rolls to her chest, and finally broke down. The sobs came, violent and uncontrollable, as if all the accumulated pain of those days, those years, was finally finding a way out. Edward stopped a few feet away. Something inside him broke at the sight of that scene. It wasn't cheap pity, it wasn't superiority. It was recognition. It was memory. It was the memory of a boy who had also once cried from hunger and shame. He approached slowly so as not to startle her. Laura didn't notice his presence until he spoke, his low, gentle voice cutting through the sound of the rain. "Child, are you all right?" Laura jerked her head up, her eyes wide with fright. She saw a tall man in a dark suit and an elegant overcoat, looking down at her with an expression that was not one of judgment. It was something softer, almost protective. She tried to get up quickly, stumbling on her own weak legs. The rolls fell to the ground again. I didn't," she stammered, her voice failing. Edward raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Easy. You don't need to be afraid. I just want to help." Laura shook her head, tears mixing with the rain. She couldn't speak. The shame was so great she felt like running, disappearing, never having to face another human being again. "Did you take these rolls from somewhere?" Edward asked, his voice still gentle without accusation. Laura nodded, sobbing. I stole them. From the bakery. But I didn't want to, I swear I didn't. It's just that my mum's sick, she's had a fever for days, and there's nothing at home, and I didn't know what to do." The words tumbled out, desperate, as if she needed to explain herself before the whole world condemned her. Edward felt his chest tighten. He knelt on the wet pavement, bringing himself to her level, completely ignoring the fact that his expensive suit was being ruined by the dirty water. "What's your name?" "Laura. Laura Walker." "How old are you, Laura?" 12. "And your mother? Where is she?" "At home. In the flat. She's really sick. She can't even get out of bed." Laura wiped her face with the back of her hand, trying to control her crying. "I know it was wrong, I know, but I didn't know what to do. She needs to eat, she needs medicine, and I don't have any money, I don't have anything." Okay. Edward placed a hand on her shoulder, a light but comforting gesture. "Here's what we'll do. First, we're going to buy some real food. Then you'll take me to your home and I'll call a doctor to see your mother. How does that sound?" Laura blinked, confused. "What? But why? Why would you do that?" Edward smiled, a small but sincere smile. "Because one day someone helped me when I needed it, and because no child should have to steal food to feed their sick mother." Laura looked at him, still suspicious, still trembling with cold and fear. But there was something in that man's eyes, a genuine kindness she recognized because it was so different from everything she was used to seeing. "You're not going to call the police?" Edward shook his head. "No, I'm not going to call anyone. But you have to promise me one thing." Laura waited, her heart tight. "Promise me you'll never do this again, that you'll never have to do this again." Laura nodded so hard her wet hair whipped against her face. I promise. I'll never do it again, I swear." "Then it's a deal, shall we?" Edward stood up, extending his hand to her. Laura looked at that large, steady hand, then at her own reflection in a puddle of water. She was soaked, dirty, her face stained with tears and shame. But in that moment, something changed. A tiny spark of hope ignited within her. She took Edward's hand. They walked together through the rain, entering a supermarket a few blocks away. Edward didn't ask too many questions. He simply grabbed a trolley and began filling it with food: rice, beans, pasta, meat, chicken, fruit, vegetables, milk, bread, biscuits. Laura followed him in silence, still not quite believing what was happening. When they reached the checkout, Edward paid for everything without batting an eye. Then he hailed a taxi and put the bags in the boot. "Take me to your home now." Laura was still dazed, but she obeyed. She gave the driver the address, and they drove through the still rainy streets to the old building on Tobin Street. Climbing the 5 flights of stairs was a challenge. The hallway was dark, with burnt-out light bulbs, and smelled of mold and damp. Edward carried most of the bags, climbing without complaint, though he was visibly tired when they reached the top floor. Laura opened the flat door with trembling hands. The place was tiny, poorer than Edward had imagined, but it was clean. There was a visible effort to maintain dignity in that space, even with so little. "Mum," Laura called, entering slowly. "Mum, I'm back." A weak voice came from the bedroom. "Laura? You took a... Well, sweetheart, are you all right?" Laura swallowed hard and looked at Edward, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I am, Mum. And I brought someone to help you." Mariana Walker appeared at the bedroom door, leaning on the frame. She was 33, but looked much older. Her brown hair was disheveled, her face pale and sweaty from the fever, her eyes sunken. She wore an old nightgown and a frayed dressing gown. But even so, there was something strong about her, a dignity that the illness couldn't completely erase. When she saw Edward standing in the living room with all those shopping bags, her face transformed into a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Edward took a step forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "My name is Edward Williams. I found your daughter on the street, and she told me you were ill. I came to bring food and help." Mariana looked at Laura, who lowered her eyes, unable to face her mother. Then she looked back at Edward, the suspicion still present. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity," Edward said firmly but without harshness. "It's help. And there's a difference. Your daughter was scared, hungry, desperate to take care of you. No mother should have to see her daughter like that, and no child should have to carry that weight alone." Mariana felt her legs weaken. She leaned more heavily on the doorframe, and Laura rushed to support her. "Mum, please, he just wants to help. I did something wrong today, but he wasn't angry. He said he's going to call a doctor." Mariana looked at her daughter, and then she understood. She saw the guilt on Laura's face, the shame, the desperation, and her heart broke. "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, my God, what did you do?" Laura started crying again. "I stole bread, Mum, from the bakery. I know it's wrong. I know you always taught me to be honest, but I couldn't stand seeing you like this, not eating anything, with no strength." Mariana hugged her daughter and they both cried together. a cry of pain, of shame, but also of love. Edward stood there watching in silence, feeling something old and deep stir within him. Memories of his own childhood, of his own mother fighting to maintain her dignity, even when all seemed lost. After a few minutes, Mariana composed herself. She wiped her tears and looked at Edward with a mixture of gratitude and wounded pride. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to." "And what do you want in return?" Edward shook his head. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I just want you to get better, so your daughter doesn't have to go through this again." Mariana stared at him for long seconds, as if trying to find the catch, the trick, the hidden price. But all she saw was sincerity. She nodded slowly. "All right, thank you." Edward smiled. "I'm going to call my doctor now. He'll come here today to examine you, and tomorrow, if you agree, I'll send a social worker to talk about some opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "A job, in one of my companies. What's your experience in?" Mariana hesitated. I've worked as a cleaner, a kitchen assistant. I've done a bit of everything. But it's been 2 years since I've been able to hold down a steady job. Something always comes up. Laura gets sick, not enough money for transport." "I understand." Edward took out his phone. "Well, let's take care of your health. First, we can talk about the rest later." He made the call, explaining the situation to his trusted doctor, who promised to be there in less than an hour. Then he helped Laura put the groceries away in the old fridge and the nearly empty cupboards. When he finished, Edward prepared to leave. He stopped at the door and looked at the two of them, mother and daughter, huddled together on the small sofa in the living room. "You're going to be okay, I promise." Laura got up and ran to him. "Mr. Williams," she called, her voice still trembling. "Thank you. Really, thank you. And I promise I'll never do that again." Edward knelt again, bringing himself to her level, and placed his hands on the girl's shoulders. "I know you won't. And you know why? Because you're a good girl. What you did today doesn't define who you are. What defines you is what you do from now on." Laura nodded, the tears returning, but this time they were different tears. They were tears of relief, of hope. Edward left the flat and slowly descended the 5 flights of stairs, deep in thought. When he reached the street, the rain had eased to a fine drizzle. He walked to where his driver was waiting, but before getting into the car he stood for a moment, looking up at the old building. Something inside him had changed that afternoon. He didn't know what exactly, but he felt that this encounter with Laura and Mariana was not by chance. It was a reminder, a calling, an opportunity to be more than just a successful businessman. He got into the car and asked the driver to take him home, but his mind remained there in that small, dignified flat with that girl who promised never to steal again, and that mother who fought to preserve her honor even with almost nothing. And for the first time in a long time, Edward Williams felt that his life had a purpose greater than simply accumulating success and wealth. For the first time in a long time, he felt there was something more important to be done. As the car glided through the illuminated streets of London, he was already starting to make plans. He didn't know all the details yet, but he knew one thing for sure: that girl and her mother would have a chance, a real chance to rebuild their lives. And perhaps in the process he himself could rebuild something within him that had been lost over the years, buried under meetings, numbers, and the weight of success. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside Edward's car, for the first time in a long time, there was something like peace. Dr. Henry Davis arrived at Mariana's flat about 40 minutes after Edward's call. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and discreetly framed glasses, carrying a black leather medical bag that was worn with time. He had the gentle eyes of someone who chose medicine not for the money, but for the genuine calling to care for people. Laura opened the door as soon as she heard the bell, her eyes still swollen from crying. The doctor smiled at her calmly, introducing himself before entering. Mariana was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in an old but clean blanket, trying to appear stronger than she really felt. "Good evening, Mrs. Walker. I'm Dr. Davis. I'm here at Mr. Williams's request." Mariana nodded, still suspicious but too tired to resist. Dr. Davis approached, opened his bag on the coffee table, and began the examination. He took her temperature, listened to her lungs, checked her throat, and asked about her symptoms. Laura stood nearby, watching every movement intently, her hands clasped tightly. After about 15 minutes, the doctor put his equipment away and looked at Mariana seriously, but without alarm. "You have a rather advanced respiratory infection, nothing that can't be treated, but you need antibiotics and complete rest. How long have you been like this?" 5 days with a high fever, Mariana answered, her voice hoarse. "But I'd been feeling unwell for about 2 weeks. And you didn't go to a clinic?" Mariana looked down, ashamed. "I tried, but the queue was enormous and I couldn't stand waiting. And then I didn't even have the strength to leave the house." Dr. Davis nodded understandingly. "I'll prescribe the necessary medication. Edward has already instructed me to arrange everything. The pharmacy will deliver it today. But you must follow the treatment strictly, understand? No getting up to do any strenuous activity, no trying to work before you're fully recovered." Mariana looked at Laura, then back at the doctor. "Doctor, I'm very grateful, but I can't afford all this." Henry smiled. "You don't need to worry about that right now. Edward is an old friend of mine. He's taking care of everything. You just need to focus on getting better." After giving all the instructions, prescribing the medication, and leaving his card with an emergency number, Dr. Davis said goodbye. Laura walked him to the door, thanking him softly, still not quite believing that all of this was happening. When the door closed, mother and daughter were left alone in the silence of the small flat. Mariana looked at Laura with eyes full of tears. "Come here, sweetheart." Laura approached slowly and sat next to her mother on the sofa. Mariana pulled her into a tight hug, and they stayed like that for long minutes, just feeling each other's presence, sharing the relief and the fear, the gratitude and the guilt. "I'm so sorry, Mum," Laura whispered against Mariana's shoulder. "I shouldn't have done that. I know you always taught me better." Mariana gently pushed her daughter away, holding her face in both hands. "Laura, listen. You are not to blame for anything. The blame is mine. I'm the mother. I should be taking care of you, not the other way around. But you're sick. It's not your fault." "I know, but I also know that I put you in a situation a 12-year-old should never have to face." Mariana wiped Laura's tears with her thumbs. "You're strong, sweetheart. Stronger than I ever imagined. But you shouldn't have to be this strong." Laura hugged her mother again, and they stayed like that until the doorbell rang once more. It was the delivery man from the pharmacy, bringing a bag full of medicine, rehydration salts, vitamins, and even a new digital thermometer. That night, Laura prepared a simple dinner with the food Edward had bought: rice, beans, and a stewed chicken she made following the instructions her mother gave from the living room. It wasn't perfect, but it was hot, fragrant, and most importantly, it was real food after days of eating almost nothing. They ate dinner together slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a feast. Afterwards, Laura gave her mother the medicine as the doctor had instructed and helped her to bed. Before turning off the bedroom light, Mariana held her daughter's hand. "Laura, this man, Edward, he seems like a good person, but you were careful, weren't you? You didn't accept anything strange from him?" Laura shook her head. "No, Mum, he just wanted to help. He said someone helped him once, too." Mariana nodded, thoughtful. "All right. We'll see how it goes. But promise me one thing." "What?" "Promise me you'll never do what you did today again. Never again, no matter what happens. If we need food, we'll find help another way. But stealing, no. That's not who we are." Laura nodded firmly. "I promise, Mum. I promised him, and I promise you too, never again. Good girl, now go to sleep. Tomorrow is another day." Laura turned off the light and went to the small mattress she shared with her mother. She lay down next to Mariana, listening to her slow, heavy breathing. The fever was still there, but it already seemed a little lower. The medicine would soon start to take effect. For the first time in many days, Laura was able to sleep peacefully, lulled by the feeling that maybe things really could get better. The next morning, a Friday, Laura woke to the sound of the doorbell. She got up slowly, trying not to wake her mother, and went to the door. The other side she found a woman of about 40, short, plump, with short blonde hair and a warm smile. She wore simple but neat clothes and carried a document folder. "Good morning, dear. You must be Laura, right? My name is Regina Miller. Mr. Williams asked me to come and talk with you both." Laura opened the door, still half asleep. "Please come in. My mum is still sleeping." Regina entered, looking around discreetly. There was no judgment in her eyes, just professional observation. She had worked as a social worker for one of Edward's companies for over 10 years and was experienced in delicate situations. "That's all right, we can wait for her to wake up. In the meantime, have you had breakfast?" Laura shook her head. "Not yet." "Then let's make something together, shall we?" They went to the small kitchen, and Regina started making coffee and sandwiches with the ingredients Edward had left. Laura watched her, impressed by the woman's natural ease, which seemed to make everything simpler and less frightening. "Do you go to school, Laura?" "I do, the state school nearby." "And how's it going?" Laura shrugged. "It's okay. I try, but sometimes it's hard to concentrate." "I understand." Regina placed the sandwiches on a plate. "And what do you like to do? Do you have any dreams?" Laura was silent for a moment, as if she had never stopped to think about it. "I like to read. When I can borrow books from the school library I read. I like stories." "What kind of stories?" "Any kind, adventure, mystery, romance. I just like stories where people manage to change things, you know, where they fight, and in the end, they're okay." Regina smiled, touched. "Those are the best stories." Just then, Mariana appeared at the kitchen door, leaning on the frame. She looked a little better, her face less pale, though still obviously weak. "Good morning. Are you Regina?" "I am." Regina approached, helping Mariana to a seat at the table. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Still weak, but better. The medicine is helping." "That's great. I'm here to talk about some possibilities Mr. Williams would like to offer you." Mariana looked at her cautiously. "What kind of possibilities?" Regina opened her folder and took out some papers. "A job. We have a few openings in different sectors of Mr. Williams's group of companies. He asked me to present the options and see what would make the most sense for you." Mariana blinked, surprised. "A job? Just like that?" "It's not just like that," Regina explained patiently. "Mr. Williams was impressed by your situation and your determination. He believes everyone deserves an opportunity, and you have experience, you want to work, you just needed a chance." Mariana was silent, processing. Laura held her mother's hand under the table, squeezing it tightly. "What are the positions?" Regina spent the next 20 minutes explaining the options. There were openings for a general services assistant in the offices, a kitchen assistant in the restaurants, a receptionist, and one that caught special attention, a cleaning supervisor in one of the commercial buildings the group managed. "That last one is more work," Regina explained. "You'd have to coordinate a team, make schedules, manage supplies, deal with problems, but the salary is better, and there's room for growth." Mariana looked at the paper as if it were an alien object. "But I've never supervised anything. I've only ever cleaned, worked alone. I don't know if I can do it." "That's why there's a 3-month training period." Regina smiled encouragingly. "You'll learn everything you need, and Mr. Williams has already instructed the person in charge of the department to be patient and provide all the necessary support." Mariana looked at Laura, who was staring at her with hope in her eyes. Then she looked back at Regina. "And if I can't do it? What if I'm not good enough?" "Then you can move to one of the other positions. No one will punish you for trying." Regina placed her hand over Mariana's. "Mr. Williams just wants to give you a chance. What you do with it is up to you." Mariana took a deep breath. She felt her heart pounding, a mixture of fear and hope so intense it almost hurt. How long had she dreamed of an opportunity like this? How many doors had she knocked on, only to be told no, to be treated as disposable, as if her poverty were a character flaw? And now suddenly there was a way out, a real chance. "I accept," Mariana said, her voice firm despite the tremor. "I'll take the supervisor position. I'll try." Regina smiled, opening her folder again. "Excellent. Then let's start with the paperwork. Do you have your documents?" "I do. ID, national insurance number, proof of address. Perfect. And you'll only start after you're fully recovered. The doctor needs to give you the all clear first. For now, you can rest and prepare yourself mentally. The two spent the morning sorting out details, filling out forms, talking about expectations and challenges. Laura stayed nearby the whole time, listening intently, absorbing every word as if she were watching her mother be reborn right before her eyes. When Regina finally left, it was already noon. She left her card, the organized papers, and a promise that she would return the following week to see how Mariana was recovering. As soon as the door closed, Mariana stood in the middle of the living room, holding the documents to her chest. The tears began to fall, silent, but they were not tears of sadness. "We did it, Laura. We got a chance." Laura hugged her mother, and they stood like that for long minutes, crying together, this time from relief, from hope, from gratitude for a future that finally seemed possible. The following weeks were a slow but steady transformation. Mariana followed the treatment strictly, taking all her medicine, resting as the doctor had ordered. Laura cared for her with dedication, preparing meals, keeping the flat clean, managing the medication schedule with the responsibility of someone much older. Edward called a few times to see how they were. Brief conversations, always respectful, always genuinely interested. He never asked invasive questions, never demanded anything, never made them feel indebted. It was pure, untethered help. At the end of the third week, Dr. Davis returned for a follow-up appointment. He examined Mariana carefully and at the end smiled with satisfaction. "You're doing great. The infection is completely cleared. I still recommend you take it. Easy, don't push yourself too hard, but you can start resuming your normal activities." Mariana felt a wave of relief so strong it almost knocked her over. "So I can start working?" "You can. But take it easy for the first few days, all right?" "I promise." The next day, Mariana began her training as a cleaning supervisor at Canary Wharf Tower, a 20-story commercial building in East London. It was a world completely different from anything she had known. Fast lifts, elegant offices, tech and consulting firms, people in suits and high heels rushing through the corridors. For the first few days, Mariana felt completely lost. Coordinating a team of 8 people, making schedules, managing supplies, dealing with complaints from employees of the companies occupying the building, it all seemed too impossible, too complex for someone like her. Her immediate supervisor, Vera Thompson, was a 50-year-old woman, thin, tall, with a stern but fair gaze. She was tough on Mariana, pointing out every mistake, every slip-up, but she was also patient, teaching step by step, repeating as many times as necessary. "You have to be firm, Mariana," Vera would say, looking at her intently. "These women you're coordinating are hard workers, but they need someone who knows how to lead. If you're weak, they'll walk all over you." "I don't know how to be firm," Mariana admitted, her voice low. "I've always been the one who obeyed." "Then it's time to learn," Vera crossed her arms. "Leadership isn't about being mean or shouting at people. It's about having confidence, about knowing what needs to be done and making sure it gets done. Can you do that?" Mariana looked at her, feeling something stir inside her chest. "I can try." "Then try." And Mariana tried. She made many mistakes at first. She forgot to make schedules, mixed up supply orders, let problems slip by that she should have resolved. But every time she made a mistake, Vera was there, not to humiliate her, but to teach. And every time she got something right, even if it was small, Vera acknowledged it. "Good work today," the woman would say with a brief nod before leaving. And these small victories began to accumulate. Over time, Mariana started to understand the dynamics of the job, to anticipate problems, to deal with the staff with more confidence. She still had doubts, still made mistakes, but each day became a little easier, a little less frightening. Meanwhile, Laura continued at school, but something had changed in her too. Now that she no longer had to worry about hunger, bills, or her mother's illness, she could concentrate better. Her grades improved. Her teachers began to notice her potential. One day her English teacher, Mrs. Celia Davies, a lady with white hair and reading glasses hanging around her neck, called her over after class. "Laura, I've noticed you have a knack for writing. Your stories are very good, very mature for your age." Laura felt shy. "Thank you, miss." "Have you ever thought about entering any writing competitions? There's a national one for students from all over the UK. I think you should give it a try." "Me?" Laura's eyes widened. "But I've never done anything like that." "That's exactly why you should try," Mrs. Davies smiled. "Everyone has a first time, and you have talent, girl. Don't let it go to waste." Laura took the idea home, half embarrassed, half excited. She told Mariana during dinner, expecting her mother to say it was silly, that she should focus on more practical things. But Mariana surprised her. "You should do it." "Really? Really?" Mariana held her daughter's hand. "Laura, you're intelligent. You always have been. I just was never able to give you the conditions to develop it. But now things are different. Now you can dream. And I want you to dream." Laura felt her eyes sting. "But what if I don't win?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you tried, that you believed in yourself." That night, Laura began to write her story for the competition. It was about a girl who learned that making a mistake doesn't define who you are but what you do after the E. Mistake does. It was about forgiveness, about new beginnings, about the unexpected kindness of strangers. It was, though she didn't know it yet, about herself. The months passed, and Mariana and Laura's life stabilized. They had a more dignified home now, with better furniture, food always in the fridge, proper winter clothes. They weren't rich, far from it, but they had enough. And more importantly, they had hope. Edward continued to follow their progress from a distance, always discreet, always respectful. He occasionally sent books for Laura, chosen carefully by his assistant, but always with a handwritten note. Small. Messages of encouragement, reminders that she was special, that she had potential. Laura kept each note in a shoebox under her bed, as if they were treasures. One Saturday afternoon, 3 months after that rainy day, Edward visited Canary Wharf Tower. Officially, it was a routine inspection. Unofficially, he wanted to see how Mariana was doing. He found her on the 15th floor, talking with 2 members of the cleaning team about a problem with one of the cleaning products. Mariana was different, not just in her clothes, which were now the proper, well-kept uniform. It was in her posture, the way she spoke, the confidence that emanated from her. Edward watched from a distance for a few minutes without her noticing. He saw how she solved the problem firmly, but without harshness, how the staff respected her, how comfortable she seemed in a role that months ago had seemed impossible. Vera Thompson appeared beside Edward, also watching. "She's good," the woman said bluntly. "She struggled at first, but she got over it. Now she's one of the best supervisors I've ever had." Edward smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. You were the one who gave her this chance, weren't you?" "I was." Vera looked at him, curious. "Why? What did she do to deserve it?" "She existed," Edward replied simply. "She existed and fought and didn't give up, even when everything was against her." Vera nodded, looking back at Mariana. "Well, whatever the reason, you did the right thing. She really deserved it." When Mariana finally saw Edward, her face lit up. She approached, smiling, and for the first time since they met, there was no shame or distrust in her, only genuine gratitude. "Mr. Williams, how are you?" "Well, Mariana, and you? How's the job?" "It's good. Hard. Sometimes, but good. I'm learning a lot." "Vera tells me you're doing very well." Mariana blushed slightly. "I try. Every day I try to do my best. That's all anyone can ask." Edward looked around at the clean and tidy corridor. "And Laura? How is she?" "She's great. Studying hard, getting good grades. She's entered a writing competition at school." "That's wonderful." "It is." Mariana smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "She's so different, Mr. Williams, more confident, happier, and it's all thanks to you." Edward shook his head. No, it's thanks to you. I only gave you the opportunity. You were the one who had the courage to seize it. Mariana felt tears well up, but she held them back. Even so, I'll never forget what you did for us. Never. Edward was silent for a moment, thoughtful. You know, Mariana, that day I found Laura on the street. She reminded me of something I had forgotten. She reminded me of where I came from, of how hard life can be for those who have nothing. And she reminded me that small gestures can change everything. Mariana looked at him intently, sensing there was something deeper in his words. The truth is, you two changed something in me as well, Edward continued. You made me realize that success without purpose is empty, that having money without making a difference in someone's life is wasting an opportunity. And because of that, I'm planning something bigger. What? A foundation to help vulnerable families, especially mothers and children, to offer not just immediate assistance, but real opportunities. Jobs, education, housing, everything a family needs to rebuild their life with dignity. Mariana was speechless for a moment. That's incredible, Mr. Williams. And I wanted you to be a part of it. Not now. You're still learning, still establishing yourself. But in the future, when you're ready, I'd like you to consider working at the foundation. Your experience, what you've been through, can help other people who are in the same situation. Mariana felt her heart race. I don't know if I'd be up to it. You are, Edward smiled. More than you know. They said their goodbyes, and Edward left the building with the feeling that he was on the right path, that the decision made on a rainy day, guided more by heart than by reason, was unfolding into something much bigger than he could have ever predicted. As he drove back to his office, Edward thought about the promise Laura had made that day, the promise to never steal again, to never have to steal again, and he realized that this simple promise, spoken by a scared and hungry girl, had become the symbol of everything he wanted to build, a world where no child had to choose between hunger and honesty, a world where poverty was not a life sentence, but just a temporary circumstance that could be overcome with opportunity and dignity. And for the first time in a long time, Edward Williams felt that his life had a meaning that went beyond financial statements and business meetings. It had a purpose, and that purpose had begun with a girl holding a bag of bread in the rain. 6 months after that encounter in the rain, Mariana and Laura's life had changed in ways they could hardly believe when they stopped to reflect. The small flat on Tobin Street was still their home, but now it had new curtains on the windows, a comfortable sofa in the living room, a working television, and most importantly, a sense of security that was once just a distant dream. Mariana woke up every day at 5:30 in the morning, prepared breakfast for herself and Laura, got ready carefully, and headed to her job at Canary Wharf Tower. She was no longer the fragile, frightened woman from months ago. Now she walked with her head held high, greeted her colleagues with confidence, and coordinated her team with firmness and kindness. Vera Thompson had already commented several times that Mariana had the potential to take on even greater responsibilities in the future. Laura, for her part, was in Year 7 and stood out. Among her peers, her essays were read aloud by Mrs. Davies as an example for the class, and she had developed a passion for books that made her spend hours in the small school library. The national writing competition she had entered had not yet announced the results, but regardless, the experience of writing that story had transformed her. It was a September afternoon, still cool, but with a shy sun beginning to peek through the clouds, when something unexpected happened at the Regent's Plate, one of the establishments in Edward's chain located in Soho. The restaurant manager, Charles Jenkins, a 40-year-old man with decades of experience in the food industry, was checking the stock when he heard a strange noise coming from the service area at the back. He approached slowly and found a boy, no more than 10 years old, trying to stuff bread and pieces of cold cuts into an old plastic bag. The boy was far too thin, with dirty, torn clothes, disheveled hair, and wide, fearful eyes. When he saw Charles, he froze on the spot, the bag falling from his trembling hands. "Hey, hey, easy now." Charles raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not going to hurt you." But the boy was too terrified to listen. He tried to run, but Charles was faster, not to grab him violently, but to block the exit. "Wait, just wait a second." Charles knelt, bringing himself to the boy's level. "What's your name?" The boy didn't answer. He was shaking, tears beginning to stream down his dirty face. "Okay, it's all right. You don't have to tell me now." Charles looked at the bag on the floor, with the bread and cold cuts scattered. "Are you hungry?" The boy nodded slowly, still not speaking. "And you have a family? Mum, Dad, anyone?" Another nod, still in silence. Charles took a deep breath. He knew that look. He knew that desperation. He had seen it before, in dozens of children who roamed the streets of central London, invisible to most people. "Stay here, don't leave, okay? I'll be right back." He went to his office and called Edward directly. The two had a close relationship. Edward trusted him completely and always asked Charles to inform him of any unusual situations. "Mr. Williams? Charles here from the Regent's Plate. Sorry to bother you, but there's a situation here I think you'd want to know about." On the other end of the line, in his office in Shoreditch, Edward was reviewing projects for the future foundation when he answered. "Go ahead, Charles. There's a boy here. Tried to take some food. Looks like he hasn't eaten in days. Reminded me of that story you told me about the girl and her mother." Edward felt something tighten in his chest. "How old is he?" "About 10, I'd say." "Is he still there?" "He is. I told him to wait." "Don't let him leave. I'm on my way now." Edward hung up, grabbed his car keys and left his office without further explanation to his assistant. During the drive to Soho, his mind went back to that rainy afternoon, to that encounter with Laura that had changed not only her life and Mariana's, but his own. When he arrived at the restaurant, he found Charles in the office with the boy, who was sitting in a chair with a plate of hot food in front of him. The boy was eating slowly, with trembling hands, as if afraid someone would take the food away from him at any moment. Edward entered slowly without making a sound and watched for a few seconds. The boy looked up, startled, but Charles made a reassuring gesture. "This is the owner of the restaurant, Mr. Williams. He's not going to do anything bad to you." Edward pulled up a chair and sat at the table, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hello. What's your name?" The boy swallowed the piece of bread he was chewing. "Gabriel." "Gabriel," Edward repeated, nodding. "Nice to meet you. Do you live near here?" Gabriel shook his head. "I live in Islington, with my mum and my little brother." "And your father?" "Don't have a dad. He left a long time ago." Edward nodded without judgment. "And your mother? Is she all right?" Gabriel looked down, his voice growing even fainter. "She's trying to find a job, but she can't. We got evicted from our flat last month. Now we're staying in a shelter. And you came all the way here by yourself?" "I did." Gabriel wiped away tears with the back of his hand. "My brother's hungry. He's only 4. He cries every night because his tummy's empty. I couldn't stand seeing him like that anymore." Edward felt his throat tighten. It was Laura all over again. It was the same story, the same desperation, the same desperate courage of a child trying to protect the one they love. "Gabriel, you did the wrong thing by trying to take food without paying. But I understand why you did it. And I'm not going to call the police. I'm not going to do anything to you." Gabriel looked up, surprised. "You're not?" "No. But I need you to take me to your mother. I need to talk to her." Gabriel hesitated. "She'll be mad at me." "Not if I explain that. I've come to help." Edward stood up. "Charles, prepare a very large bag of food. Bread, cold cuts, fruit, milk, everything a family with a young child needs." "I'll get right on it, Mr. Williams." 20 minutes later, Edward and Gabriel were in the car, driving to the municipal shelter in Islington, where Gabriel's family was temporarily staying. The boy was quiet in the passenger seat, still suspicious, but beginning to realize that this man was not a threat. When they arrived at the shelter, an old and poorly maintained building, but with dedicated volunteers trying to maintain the dignity of those who sought refuge there, Gabriel led Edward to one of the communal rooms on the second floor. There, in a corner with 2 thin mattresses on the floor, was a young woman, no more than 30, thin and with deep dark circles under her eyes, cradling a small boy who was whimpering softly. When she saw Gabriel enter with a stranger and a huge bag of food, she stood up quickly, frightened. "Gabriel, what have you done? Who is this man?" "Mum, calm down." Gabriel approached her. "This is Mr. Williams. He wants to help us." The woman looked at Edward with a mixture of fear and suspicion. "My name is Patricia Evans. What did my son do?" Edward placed the bag on the floor and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "He tried to take food from my restaurant, but I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to help." Over the next few minutes, Edward explained everything that had happened. He told them about Laura, about Mariana, about how that first encounter had transformed him, and about his desire to help other families in the same situation. Patricia listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When Edward finished, she shook her head, almost in disbelief. "Why would you do this? Nobody helps for free. There's always a price." "There's no price," Edward said firmly. "There's only one condition, that you accept the help and use it to rebuild your lives, that you have hope again." Patricia looked at Gabriel, then at her younger son, still crying softly from hunger, and finally back at Edward. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll let me try to help." Patricia nodded, sobbing. "Yes, please, we need help." Edward smiled. Then it settled. "Tomorrow I'll send Regina, my social worker, here to talk to you about a job and housing. And today you'll have good food to eat." He handed the bag to Patricia, who opened it with trembling hands and began to cry even harder when she saw the amount of food inside. Gabriel hugged his mother, and the three of them stood there embracing, while Edward watched, feeling again that sense of purpose he had discovered months ago. When he got back to his car, Edward immediately called Regina. "Regina, I need you to go to the municipal shelter in Islington. Tomorrow. There's a mother there, Patricia Evans, with 2 children. Same situation as Mariana. We'll repeat the protocol." On the other end of the line, Regina smiled. "Understood, Mr. Williams. I'll be there first thing. And Regina, I think it's time to accelerate the plans for the foundation. We can't wait any longer." "I completely agree. I'll start organizing everything." In the following days, Edward set in motion a series of actions that had been maturing in his mind for months. He called meetings with lawyers, accountants, social workers, architects. The foundation that had been just a vague idea began to take concrete shape. He decided to call it the Fresh Start Foundation. The symbol would be simple but powerful, an outstretched hand holding a loaf of bread, representing both basic need and the promise of never going hungry again. It was a direct tribute to Laura, to the girl who had held a bag of bread in the rain and, without knowing it, planted the seed of something much bigger. Mariana was one of the first people Edward approached when the foundation began to materialize. He arranged to have coffee with her in a cafe near Canary Wharf Tower, and there, over cups of coffee and pastries, he explained his vision. "The foundation will work on 3 main fronts," Edward explained, showing her the papers he had prepared. "First, emergency assistance, food, temporary housing, medical care for families who are homeless or in extreme vulnerability. Second, job opportunities. We'll have partnerships with companies that offer real jobs, with fair wages and the possibility of growth. And third, education and training. Vocational courses, school support for the children, psychological counseling when needed." Mariana listened intently, impressed by the level of detail. "It's very ambitious, Mr. Williams." "I know. But it's necessary." Edward took a sip of his coffee. "And I want you to be a part of it, Mariana. Not now, you're still in the middle of your own process. But in a year, maybe 2, when you feel ready, I want you to come and work at the foundation, to coordinate the employment and training program. No one understands what these people are going through better than you do." Mariana felt her eyes sting. "Mr. Williams, I barely finished secondary school. I don't have the qualifications for something like that." "You have something better than qualifications. You have lived experience. You have genuine empathy. You have the strength of someone who has hit rock bottom and managed to climb back up." Edward held her hand across the table. And I will provide the training you need, courses, workshops, everything. But you already have the essential part." Mariana wiped away her tears, moved. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You don't need to thank me. You just need to keep being who you are. And when the time comes, help other women the way you were helped. While Edward was building his foundation and Patricia was beginning her own journey of recovery with Regina's help, Laura continued to focus on her studies. Classes finished at 5 in the afternoon, and she always went straight home, did her homework, helped Mariana prepare dinner, and then dedicated herself to reading. One day in October, Mrs. Davies called her over after class, holding a large envelope and a smile on her face. "Laura, I have some news for you." The girl felt her heart race. "About the competition?" "About the competition." Mrs. Davies handed her the envelope. "You came in 3rd place in the regional category for London." Laura's eyes widened. "Really? I won?" "You won. 3rd place among more than 5,000 participants from across the region. Your story was chosen as one of the best." Laura held the envelope with trembling hands, unable to believe it. Inside was an official certificate, a letter of congratulations, and a book voucher worth £500. "This is incredible." Mrs. Davies placed a hand on Laura's shoulder. "And you deserve it, you know. Your story is beautiful, it's true, it's touching. You have a special talent." Laura ran home faster than ever. She climbed the 5 flights of stairs without stopping, opened the door and called for her mother before even taking off her backpack. "Mum! Mum!" Mariana came out of the bedroom, startled. "What is it? Did something happen?" "I won!" Laura was radiant, holding the envelope as if it were the greatest treasure in the world. "I won the writing competition, 3rd place." Mariana brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "What? Really? Really? Look at the certificate." Mother and daughter hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. Mariana held Laura's face in her hands. "I am so proud of... Are you so proud? You are so intelligent, so special. I just wrote about what happened to us, Mum, about how everything changed that day. And it was perfect. It was true." Mariana kissed her daughter's forehead. "You have a bright future ahead of you, sweetheart. You're going to be someone important." That night, Mariana called Edward to tell him the news. He was so happy that he asked to speak directly to Laura. "Laura, congratulations," Edward said, his voice warm on the other end of the line. "I always knew you were special." "Thank you, Mr. Williams, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what?" "Because if you hadn't helped me that day, I never would have managed. I never would have had the time to study, to write, to dream." Edward felt his throat tighten. "Laura, you always had the talent. I just helped open a door, but you were the one who walked through it." "Even so. Thank you." When they hung up, Edward stood for long minutes looking out the window of his flat, watching the city lights. He thought of Laura, of Gabriel, of Mariana, of Patricia. He thought of all the other families who were still out there, struggling, suffering, needing just one opportunity. And he knew with absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing. 2 weeks later, Edward organized a special meeting in his office. He invited Mariana, Regina, Charles from the restaurant, Vera Thompson, and a few other key employees from his companies. When everyone was gathered, Edward stood up and began to speak. "I want to thank you all for being here. You are here because you are people I trust, people who share the same vision of a better world." Edward paused, looking at each of them. "The Fresh Start Foundation is now officially incorporated. We have the legal documentation. We have financial resources that I have set aside specifically for this, and we have an action plan for the next 5 years." Everyone applauded, moved. "But more important than all of that," Edward continued, "we have a story that guides us. The story of a 12-year-old girl who on a rainy day held a bag of bread and promised never to steal again. She didn't know it, but that promise would change not only her life but mine too. And now, if all goes well, it will change the lives of hundreds, perhaps thousands of other families." Mariana, sitting in the front row, discreetly wiped away her tears. The symbol of the foundation, as you can see in the materials I've distributed, is a hand holding a loaf of bread. Edward pointed to the logo projected on the wall. It's simple, but it represents everything we believe in. It represents need, but it also represents a promise. It represents what we no longer want to see, hungry children. And it represents what we want to build, a world where everyone has not only food, but dignity, opportunity and hope. The attendees were silent, touched by his words. And to begin, Edward smiled, we will be opening the Foundation's first support center in 3 months. It will be in the Whitechapel area, where it all began. It will have a dining hall, a medical assistance area, rooms for vocational courses, a space for children, a library, everything. And it will be open to any family who needs it. The meeting ended with everyone energized and committed. Mariana stayed behind, waiting for the others to leave so she could speak with Edward alone. Mr. Williams, she began, her voice trembling, I don't know how you managed to do all this, how you have the courage to dream so big. Edward smiled. Do you know what Laura taught me that day, Mariana? That courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. She was terrified when I found her, but she had gone to get food for you. She had faced her fear because her love was greater. Mariana nodded, moved. That's what I'm doing, Edward continued. I'm afraid of failing, of not being able to help everyone, of disappointing the people who will trust us. But the love for the cause is greater than the fear, and as long as that's the case, we'll keep trying. Mariana hugged Edward, a spontaneous gesture full of gratitude. Thank you for everything, for believing in me, for believing in Laura, for believing that people like us deserve a second chance. Everyone deserves one, Mariana. Everyone. As Mariana left the office and walked down the illuminated streets of London, she felt something different inside her chest. She was no longer the desperate, sick woman who saw no way out. She was someone with a purpose, with a future, with hope. She was someone who had been rescued and was now learning to rescue others. And it had all started with a girl holding a bag of bread in the rain, making a promise that would change everything. A year had passed since that encounter in the rain, and London continued its frantic routine, indifferent to the small, silent revolutions happening in its forgotten corners. But for some people, everything had changed irreversibly. Laura was now 13, in Year 8, with grades that impressed even the most demanding teachers. The prize from the writing competition had opened doors she didn't even know existed. The state school she attended had nominated her for a scholarship to a renowned private school in the Kensington area, and after a series of exams and interviews, Laura had been accepted. Mariana could hardly believe it when she received the acceptance letter. She held the paper with trembling hands, reading and rereading the words that seemed impossible. Her daughter, the girl who had once stolen bread out of desperation, now had a full scholarship to one of the best schools in the city. "Mum, I'm going to be able to study for real," Laura said that night, her eyes shining with emotion. "I'll have labs, a big library, specialist teachers. I'll be able to dream about university." Mariana hugged her daughter, crying with joy. "You deserve all of this, and so much more, my darling. Everything." While Laura prepared to start at her new school, Mariana was also facing her own transformations. Vera Thompson had retired 2 months earlier, and surprisingly, the management of Canary Wharf Tower had promoted Mariana to the position of General Coordinator of Cleaning and Maintenance for the entire building. It was a position that demanded much more responsibility, coordinating not just one team but several, dealing with suppliers, budgets, and strategic planning. At first, Mariana felt completely lost. She constantly had imposter syndrome, the feeling that at any moment someone would realize she wasn't good enough for the job. But Edward, who followed her progress closely, encouraged her. "Mariana, you've proven your worth dozens of times," he said in one of their conversations. "Now you just need to believe in yourself." And she tried. She started taking online courses in management and administration in the few free hours she had. She read books on leadership that Edward occasionally sent. She talked to other coordinators, learned from her mistakes, and celebrated her victories. And slowly she became not just competent, but excellent at what she did. Meanwhile, the Fresh Start Foundation was taking physical form. The building in the Whitechapel area, which had once been an old abandoned warehouse, had been completely renovated. Walls were painted in light, welcoming tones, large windows let in natural light, and the space was divided into functional areas without losing a sense of spaciousness and dignity. Edward made sure that everything was designed to preserve the self-esteem of those who would use the space. He didn't want it to look like a degrading charity handout, but rather a place of opportunity, of reconstruction, of hope. The inauguration was scheduled for a Saturday in November. Edward had invited local authorities, business partners, representatives of the press, and most importantly, the families who had inspired it all. Mariana and Laura would be there, of course, Patricia and her 2 children too, as the family had managed to leave the shelter and was now living in a simple but decent flat, with Patricia working as a cook in one of Edward's restaurants. On the morning of the inauguration, Laura woke up anxious. Mariana had bought her a new dress, something simple but pretty, in a light blue shade that brought out her brown eyes. Laura looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize herself. She was no longer the thin, scared girl from a year ago. She had gained weight, her face was fuller, healthier. But the biggest change was in her eyes. They no longer carried that weight of desperation. Now there was something different there. Confidence, hope, a future. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Mariana said, appearing behind her in the mirror's reflection. "You too, Mum?" And it was true. Mariana at 34 seemed to have grown younger. Her hair was well cut and conditioned, her skin had color, her eyes shone. She wore a discreet but elegant suit, appropriate for her professional position. It was hard to believe she was the same woman who a year earlier could barely get out of bed. They took the tube to the Whitechapel area, walking the last few blocks to the new foundation building. A small crowd had already gathered outside. Banners with the Fresh Start Foundation logo decorated the facade, and Edward was at the entrance, greeting people as they arrived. When he saw Mariana and Laura, his face lit up. He approached, hugging them both with genuine affection. "You both look wonderful," he said, smiling. "Mr. Williams, everything is so beautiful." Mariana looked around, impressed. "It's hard to believe this all started with a girl and a bag of bread," Edward completed, looking at Laura. "The protagonist of our story." Laura blushed, embarrassed but proud. The ceremony began promptly at 10 in the morning. Edward took to the small stage set up in the foundation's inner courtyard, with several chairs arranged for the guests. Mariana and Laura were in the front row next to Patricia and her children. Gabriel, now 11, was visibly healthier, with clean clothes and a smile on his face. Edward began his speech, his voice firm, but filled with emotion. "Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to have you here on this very special day. The Fresh Start Foundation is a dream born from an unexpected encounter on a rainy afternoon with a girl who taught me more about courage and dignity than any business book ever could." He paused, looking directly at Laura. This girl was desperate, hungry, trying to care for her sick mother. And in a moment of desperation, she did something that went against everything she believed in. But when she was confronted, she didn't try to justify herself or run from responsibility. She cried, she asked for forgiveness, and she made a promise, a simple but powerful promise. She promised she would never do it again, and she kept it. Laura felt tears streaming down her face. Mariana held her hand, squeezing it tightly. "That promise made me think," Edward continued. "It made me remember where I came from, the hardships my own family faced, and how a single opportunity can change everything. And it made me realize that I had a responsibility to do more, to be more, to use what I've built, not just for my own benefit, but to create opportunities for other people." He gestured to the building behind him. This space was created with a single purpose, to ensure that no family has to go through what that girl and her mother went through, that no child has to choose between hunger and honesty, that no mother has to watch her child suffer without being able to help. Applause started, but Edward raised his hand, asking for silence. He wasn't finished. "But more important than the building, than the resources, than all the structure we've set up, is the spirit of this foundation. Here, we will not offer charity. We will offer opportunity. We will offer dignity. We will offer the chance to start fresh, to rebuild, to dream again. Because we believe that every person, no matter how low they have fallen, deserves a second chance. Edward looked at Mariana. Here is living proof of that. Mariana Walker, once unemployed and sick, is now one of the most competent coordinators in my companies. Her daughter Laura won a regional writing competition and is about to start at one of London's best schools on a full scholarship. Mariana stood up, moved, as the guests applauded. Laura also stood, hugging her mother. And here is another proof. Edward pointed to Patricia. Patricia Evans, who was living in a shelter with 2 young children, now works as a cook, has her own home, and is taking a vocational course in gastronomy. Her children are healthy, enrolled in school with a future ahead of them. Patricia also stood up, wiping away tears, while Gabriel and his younger brother applauded proudly. These families didn't need pity, Edward concluded. They needed opportunity, and that is what the Fresh Start Foundation will offer to hundreds, perhaps thousands of other families. Not pity, not charity that humiliates, but opportunity that uplifts, dignity that restores, hope that transforms. The applause was thunderous. Several people were visibly moved. Edward came down from the stage and invited everyone to tour the facilities. The tour began in the dining hall, a large, bright space with light wood tables and comfortable chairs. There was an industrial kitchen at the back, where nutritious meals would be prepared daily for the families being assisted. We'll serve breakfast, lunch and dinner, Regina explained to the visitors. Real nutritious food made with care, and families can eat here with dignity without having to stand in humiliating queues or prove their need. Next, they went to the medical area. There were 2 equipped consultation rooms, a small pharmacy, and a welcoming waiting area. Volunteer and some hired doctors would conduct regular checkups, ensuring families had access to basic healthcare. The library was Laura's favorite place. Shelves filled with new and used books, reading tables, computers for research. Edward had asked for book donations, and the response had been overwhelming. More than 5,000 volumes were already catalogued and available. Here, children will be able to study, do research, discover new worlds, Edward explained, placing a hand on Laura's shoulder, because education is the greatest tool for transformation there is. The vocational training rooms were spacious and well-equipped. There would be courses in IT, cooking, sewing, electrical work, plumbing, and crafts. Everything was designed to give people practical skills that could turn into a source of income. And finally, there was the children's area, a colorful and cheerful space with toys, educational materials, and staff trained in early childhood education. Children could stay there while their mothers attended courses or job interviews, ensuring they didn't have to choose between caring for their children and seeking opportunities. When the tour ended, it was already noon. Edward had prepared a special lunch for all the guests, served right there in the Foundation's dining hall. It was the first official meal served in that space, and there was something symbolic about it. Everyone sitting together, business people next to assisted families, authorities next to volunteers, sharing the same food, the same table, the same humanity. During lunch, a journalist from a major London newspaper approached Mariana and Laura. "Would you mind giving a quick interview? I'd like to tell your story." Mariana hesitated, but Laura squeezed her hand encouragingly. "It's okay, Mum. Let's tell them. Maybe it will help other people find the courage to accept help too." The interview was sincere and emotional. Mariana told of her desperation, her illness, of watching her daughter trying to be too strong for a child. Laura spoke of the fear, the hunger, of that moment she decided to steal the bread, and of how the encounter with Edward had changed not just their circumstances, but who she was as a person. "And you're not ashamed to tell this story?" the journalist asked Laura. "To publicly admit that you stole?" Laura thought for a moment before answering. "I'm ashamed of what I did, I always will be, but I also learned that one mistake doesn't define who you are. What defines you is what you do afterwards. And I promised never to do it again, and I kept my promise. So yes, I'm ashamed of the act, but I'm proud of the promise." Journalist smiled, impressed. "You're very wise for your age." "I learned from my mother, Laura looked at Mariana with admiration. She taught me that dignity doesn't come from what you have, but from who you are. Even when we had nothing, she never lost that. Mariana hugged her daughter, too emotional to speak. The article was published the following Sunday, taking up a full page of the newspaper. The headline read, "The Promise That Changed 3 Lives, How an Act of Kindness Became a Social Movement." The response was immediate and overwhelming. In the following days, the Fresh Start Foundation received hundreds of calls. People wanting to volunteer, companies offering partnerships, donations arriving from all corners of the city. But more importantly, vulnerable families began to seek help, knowing that there they would find not judgment, but opportunity. Edward was in the foundation's office, which was located in the building itself, when Regina entered with a long list of names. "Mr. Williams, we have over 200 families registered and waiting for assistance," she said, a mixture of joy and concern on her face. "It's much more than we expected." Edward looked at the list, feeling the weight of responsibility. "That's a lot of people, but each name here is a story, a family, a chance to make a difference. We're going to need to expand faster than we planned." "I'm already working on it," Regina smiled, "and we have partnership offers from other companies that want to replicate the foundation's model in other parts of the city." "Excellent, but let's be careful. Quality before quantity. There's no point in serving a lot of people superficially. Each family needs to receive real attention." While the foundation grew, Mariana was undergoing her own professional transformation. Edward had called her for a private meeting at his office in Shoreditch. "Mariana, I have a proposal for you," he began, observing her intently. "As you know, I always planned for you to be part of the foundation. I think the time has come." Mariana felt her heart race. "But my job at the building—" "You were excellent there. You transformed the department, raised the standard, but your potential is greater." Edward leaned forward. "I want you to take over as coordinator of the Foundation's employment and training program. You'll work directly with the families, identifying their skills, connecting them with opportunities, and tracking their development. You know this path better than anyone." Mariana was silent for a long moment. It was everything she had dreamed of, but it was also frightening. "Mr. Williams, I'm still learning. I still make mistakes." "Everyone does," Edward smiled. "But you have something that can't be taught in any course. True empathy. You know exactly what these women are feeling because you felt it. You know the doubts, the fears, the insecurities, and you can show them that it's possible to overcome. And if I fail, then you try again," Edward said simply. "Mariana, for this entire year, you haven't failed once at what really matters. You've been honest, dedicated, hard-working. Have you made technical mistakes? Yes. But you always owned up to them, always corrected them, always learned. That's what matters." Mariana took a deep breath. "When would I start?" "In 2 months. Enough time for you to train your replacement at the building and for us to prepare your transition. And I'll arrange for intensive training for you. A course in people management, applied psychology, coaching techniques, everything you need to do this job the way it deserves to be done." Mariana felt tears begin to fall. I accept, and I will do my absolute best." "I know you will." That night, Mariana told Laura the news. They were having dinner in their small flat, which now had a cozier decor, with pictures on the walls and plants on the windowsill. "Sweetheart, I'm going to work at the foundation. I'm going to help other women like I was helped." Laura dropped her fork and stood up, hugging her mother tightly. "Mum, that's incredible. You'll be perfect for it." "I hope so." Mariana held her daughter's face. "You know, sometimes I stop and think about everything. That's happened this past year. How everything has changed, it still feels like a dream." "It's not a dream, Mum. It's real. And we deserve it." "Do you really think so?" Mariana asked, her voice low. "Sometimes I still feel like I don't deserve all this. Like at any moment someone will realize it was all a mistake." Laura looked into her mother's eyes with a seriousness surprising for her age. "Mum, listen. That day I took that bread, I thought I had become the worst person in the world. I thought I'd never be able to look at myself. in the mirror again. But Mr. Williams taught me that one mistake doesn't define who we are, and you taught me that dignity comes from within, not from without. We do deserve it. Not because we're perfect, but because we're human, because we fight, because we don't give up. Mariana hugged her daughter, crying. When did you grow up so much, little one? Laura smiled through her tears. The day I promised never to steal again, the day I decided we deserved better, the day I accepted that accepting help isn't weakness, it's courage. And in that moment, in that small flat on Tobin Street, mother and daughter understood that the transformation they had lived through was not just external. It wasn't just about having food on the table, or a steady job, or a future ahead of them. It was about who they had become in the process. It was about recovered dignity, restored hope and reborn dreams. And it had all started with a simple promise made on a rainy afternoon by a girl holding a bag of bread. 2.5 years had passed since that rainy day that changed everything. Laura was now 15 in her first year of A-levels at St. Cecilia's College, one of the most prestigious educational institutions in London. The imposing building in Kensington was a world completely different from the state school she had attended before. The first few months were challenging in ways Laura hadn't expected. It wasn't just the difference in the academic level, although that demanded a lot from her. It was the social chasm that separated Laura from most of her classmates. While they arrived in chauffeur-driven cars, she came by tube. While they talked about international holidays, she spent her weekends studying or volunteering at the Fresh Start Foundation. While they wore designer clothes and had the latest mobile phones, Laura wore what she could buy in high street shops and had a basic device Mariana had given her for her birthday. Some students were kind and welcoming, but others, especially a group led by Bianca Sterling, the daughter of a well-known businessman, made a point of highlighting the difference. "Look, the scholarship girl," Bianca would comment, loud enough for Laura to hear, but quiet enough for the teachers not to notice. "Must be tough not being able to join us at the shopping center after school." Bianca's friends would laugh, casting disdainful glances in Laura's direction. At first, Laura tried to ignore it. She would lower her head, pretend not to hear, and focus on her studies. After all, she was there to learn, to build a better future. She couldn't let mean comments divert her from her path, but there were days when it was difficult, days when she would return home with her eyes red from holding back tears. Mariana noticed, of course. She knew her daughter too well not to. "Are they mean to you there?" Mariana asked on one of those evenings as they ate dinner. Laura hesitated before answering. "Some of them, not all, but there's one girl who always makes comments about me being on a scholarship." "And what do you do?" "I ignore it. I try to." Laura picked at her food without much appetite. "But sometimes it's hard, Mum. They have so much, and they make sure to show that I don't, as if that makes me less than them." Mariana held her daughter's hand across the table. "Listen to me very carefully, Laura. You are not less than anyone. You are stronger, more determined and braver than most of those kids who have never had to fight for anything in their lives. You earned that scholarship on your own merit. You have a talent that no money can buy." "I know, Mum. I know that in my head. But sometimes my heart doesn't understand." "Then let me remind you of where we came from." Mariana looked deep into her daughter's eyes. 3 years ago, we barely had anything to eat. I was sick. You were desperate. And today? Today I coordinate a program that helps hundreds of families. You're in one of the best schools in the city. We have a decent home, food on the table, clean clothes, and most importantly, we are proud of who we are. Laura nodded, feeling her mother's words calm the storm inside her chest. "That girl who puts you down, she might have money," Mariana continued, "but I bet she's never had to fight for anything, never learned the value of things, never discovered what she's capable of when everything is against her. You have, and that is a treasure no one can ever take from you." "Thanks, Mum. Now eat. Tomorrow you'll go back there and show them that you are so much more than they can see." Laura smiled, feeling a little stronger. While Laura faced her own challenges, Mariana was completely immersed in her work at the Fresh Start Foundation. In recent months, she had become a cornerstone of the organization. The employment and training program she coordinated had already helped over 300 families find dignified work and get back on their feet. But it wasn't easy work. Each family was a different story, with unique challenges. There were women who arrived so emotionally broken they could hardly believe they deserved a chance. There were others so used to fighting alone they didn't know how to accept help. And there were those who simply had no idea where to begin. Mariana dealt with all of them with the patience and empathy of someone who had been in their shoes. One Friday morning, she was in her office when Regina appeared with a worried expression. "Mariana, we have a delicate situation. A woman just arrived who is refusing to accept help." "Refusing? Why?" "Pride, fear, distrust. You know how it is." Mariana knew all too well. She had been the same way at the beginning. "I'll talk to her." The woman was sitting in the reception area, her arms crossed defensively, her gaze suspicious. She was about 40, with unkempt graying hair and worn but clean clothes. Beside her, a girl of about 8 looked around with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Mariana approached, pulled up a chair and sat beside them, maintaining a respectful distance. "Hi, my name is Mariana. And you are?" The woman glanced at her sideways. "Deborah. And this is your daughter?" "Yes, Julia." "It's a pleasure to meet you both." Mariana smiled gently. "Regina told me you have some doubts about accepting our help." "They're not doubts," Deborah said sharply. "It's that I don't believe in free charity. There's always a price. They always want something in return." Mariana nodded understandingly. "You're right to be cautious. The world has taught you to be suspicious, but can I tell you a story?" Deborah shrugged, but she didn't get up to leave. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you are now," Mariana began, her voice calm and honest. "Worse even, I was sick, unable to work, with nothing to eat. My daughter, who was 12 at the time, tried to steal bread from a bakery because I was starving." Deborah blinked, surprised. "She was caught by a man, a wealthy businessman. And do you know what he did? Instead of calling the police, he bought food, took it to my home, called a doctor, and offered me a job." Mariana paused. "And I, just like you, was suspicious. I thought there was a catch, that he wanted something in return." "And did he?" "No." Mariana shook her head. "He just wanted to help. And it wasn't charity. It was an opportunity. He gave me a real job with a decent salary, with a chance to grow. He treated me with respect, not pity. And today, 3 years later, I coordinate this program here. I help other women like you rebuild their lives." Deborah looked at her intently, as if trying to decide if she could believe her. "I know what you're feeling," Mariana continued. "The shame of needing help, the fear of being humiliated, the distrust that nothing good can come without a price. But I also know that, deep down, you're desperate. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't have come here." Deborah felt her eyes sting. "I have nowhere to live. I was evicted last week. I'm sleeping at a friend's house, but she can only let me stay for a few more days. And work. I lost my job 4 months ago. I can't find anything, and Julia needs things I can't give her. She needs a new uniform, school supplies, proper food." Mariana looked at the little girl who was listening to everything in silence, with those eyes too big for her small face. They were the same eyes Laura had had 3 years ago, the same eyes filled with worries a child shouldn't have. "Deborah, you don't have to decide anything right now," Mariana said gently. "But let me offer you this. Today you and Julia will have lunch here in our dining hall, good food as much as you want. Afterwards, we can talk about the temporary housing options we have, and you can take a look at the available job vacancies. You don't have to accept anything, just look. Then you can decide if you want our help or not. How does that sound?" Deborah was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right. Great, come with me." During lunch, Mariana watched Deborah and Julia eat with the same restrained desperation she and Laura had felt in those difficult days. The girl ate slowly, as if she wanted to make the meal last forever. Deborah tried to maintain her composure, but her tear-filled eyes betrayed her emotion. Afterwards, Mariana showed them the Foundation's facilities, explained the programs, and introduced them to other women who had gone through the same process. And slowly, she saw Deborah begin to open up, her defenses falling, hope starting to replace distrust. By the end of the afternoon, Deborah had accepted the help. She agreed to take the high tests for the available positions, to participate in the training courses, and to accept temporary housing until she could get back on her feet. As they were leaving, Deborah stopped at the door and looked at Mariana. "Why do you do this? Why do you care so much?" Mariana smiled. "Because someone cared about me when I needed it, and that changed everything. Now it's my turn to do the same." That evening, Mariana arrived home later than usual. Laura was in the living room studying for a maths exam. When she saw her mother come in, she noticed something different about her. A deep satisfaction, a sparkle in her eyes. "Good day at work?" Laura asked. "A very good day." Mariana sat down next to her daughter. "I helped a woman today, a woman who reminded me so much of myself 3 years ago. Distrustful, proud, afraid to accept help. But in the end, she accepted it. And I saw hope in her eyes, Laura. I saw her start to believe that she can turn her life around." Laura smiled. "That must be rewarding." "It's more than rewarding. It's—" Mariana searched for the right words. "It's like I'm paying it forward. Not to Mr. Williams because he never asked for anything. But to the universe, you know. I received help when I needed it. Now I'm passing it on." "You're making a difference, Mum," Laura hugged Mariana. "A big difference." The weeks passed, and Laura continued to face the challenges of the private school, but something in her had changed. She stopped trying to hide, to go unnoticed. She started to hold her head up, to contribute to class discussions with the sharp intelligence she always had, to show her worth through knowledge and not material possessions. This bothered Bianca even more. On one particularly difficult day during the break, she confronted Laura directly in front of several students. "You know what your problem is, Laura. You think you're better than us just because you get good grades. But deep down, you're just a poor girl who's here out of pity." Laura felt her blood boil, but she took a deep breath before responding. "It's not pity, Bianca. It's merit. I passed a difficult exam to get this scholarship. I proved I was capable. You wouldn't have been able to." Bianca turned red. "How dare you?" "It's true," Laura continued, her voice firm. "You're here because your parents have money. I'm here because I'm good, and honestly, I'd rather be good than rich." The silence that followed was heavy. Some students looked embarrassed, others impressed by Laura's courage. Bianca was visibly furious, searching for a comeback but finding none. It was then that a voice rose from the group. It was Rafaela Grant, a quiet student who had always remained neutral during Bianca's provocations. "Laura's right," Rafaela said, looking directly at Bianca. "She works harder than any of us, and she still gets the best grades. That's admirable, not shameful." Other voices began to agree. Bianca, realizing she was losing control of the situation, turned and stormed off. Her friends followed, less confidently than before. Laura felt her legs tremble. She had never stood up for herself like that, never defended herself so openly, but at the same time she felt stronger, more self-assured. Rafaela approached her. "Sorry for never saying anything before. I should have stood up for you a long time ago." "It's okay," Laura smiled. "Thank you for speaking up now." That night, when she told Mariana what had happened, her mother hugged her with pride. "You're learning something very important, sweetheart. How to defend yourself with dignity, how to value yourself. That's as important as any subject they teach at that school." It was on a Saturday morning, a few days later, that something happened that would deeply affect Laura. She was coming back from the bakery, where she had gone to buy fresh bread for breakfast, when she saw a little girl on the corner. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, thin, with dirty clothes, staring intently at the bakery window. Laura recognized that look. It was the same one she had had 3 years ago. Hunger, longing, desperation. She stopped and watched the girl for a few seconds. Then, in a spontaneous decision, she went back into the bakery. She bought a bag of rolls, a juice, and a packet of biscuits. She came out and approached the girl. "Hi," Laura said gently. "Are you hungry?" The girl looked at her, startled, ready to run. "It's okay. I'm not going to do anything." Laura held out the bag. "This is for you. You can eat it." The girl looked at the bag, then at Laura suspiciously. "Why?" "Because I know what it's like to be hungry. Because someone did this for me once, and now it's my turn to do it for you." The girl took the bag slowly, as if expecting it to be a trick. When she realized Laura was serious, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," Laura smiled. "And listen, if you need more help, there's a place called the Fresh Start Foundation in the Whitechapel area. They help children and families who are going through a tough time. My mum works there. Ask for Mariana, okay?" The girl nodded, clutching the bag to her chest, and ran off. Laura stood there in the middle of the pavement, feeling something profound stir within her. She had just done exactly what Edward had done for her. She had passed the kindness forward, and the feeling was indescribably good. When she got home and told Mariana, her mother hugged her with teary eyes. "You understand, Laura. You really understand the lesson." "What lesson?" "That kindness multiplies. That when you receive love and generosity, you don't just keep it for yourself. You pass it on. And that's how the world gets a little better, one person at a time." That afternoon, Edward called Mariana. He did so regularly to check on the program's progress and to discuss new projects for the foundation. "Mariana, I have a proposal," he said. "We're planning to expand the foundation, open 2 more centres, one in East London and another in South London. And I want you to be the general coordinator for all the employment and training programs." Mariana felt her heart leap. "General coordinator, Mr. Williams, It's a lot of responsibility, I know, but you're ready. Over the last 2 years, you've proven it, dozens of times, and more importantly, you have the right vision. You understand that this isn't about giving handouts, it's about giving opportunity." Mariana was silent, processing. Was she really ready? Could she take on something so big? As if reading her thoughts, Edward continued, "Mariana, remember when I offered you the first supervisor job? You thought you couldn't do it. Remember when I asked you to work at the foundation? You thought you weren't prepared. But look where you are now. Look how many lives you've already changed." "It's true," Mariana admitted. "So? Do you accept?" Mariana thought of Deborah, of the transformation she was seeing in that woman. She thought of all the other families she had helped. She thought of Laura giving bread to a strange girl on the street. And she knew the answer. "I accept. I'll do my very best." "I know you will." Edward smiled on the other end of the line. "You always do." When Mariana hung up, she stood for long minutes looking out the window. Outside, London continued its frantic routine. Millions of people rushing, working, struggling, dreaming. And somewhere in this enormous city, there were families going through exactly what she had gone through. Desperate families without hope, thinking there was no way out. But now there was. There was the Fresh Start Foundation. There were people like Edward, like Regina, like herself, dedicated to offering not charity, but opportunity, not pity, but dignity. And it had all started with a promise, a simple promise made by a 12-year-old girl holding a bag of bread in the rain, promising never to steal again. That promise had transformed into something much bigger. It had become a symbol, a philosophy, a movement. It had changed lives, restored hopes, rebuilt families, and it was just beginning. 5 years had passed since that encounter in the rain. Laura was now 17, about to finish her A-levels at St. Cecilia's College. She had become one of the top students in the school, admired not only for her exceptional grades, but for the maturity, sensitivity, and determination she showed in everything she did. Her relationship with her classmates had changed completely. After that confrontation with Bianca, Laura had earned respect, not through ostentation or trying to fit into standards that weren't hers, but simply by being authentic, by being academically brilliant, actively participating in the school's social projects, helping classmates who were struggling with subjects, and being kind without being submissive. Bianca, ironically, had become less hostile over time. Not exactly a friend, but she had developed a sort of reluctant respect for Laura. On one occasion, when Laura presented a project on social inequality in their sociology class, Bianca was visibly moved. After the class, for the first time, she approached Laura. "Your project was really good," she said, without looking directly into her eyes. "It made me think about things I'd never thought about before." Laura nodded, surprised but gentle. "Thank you. And Bianca hesitated. "I wanted to apologize for the comments I made when you first came here. They were cruel and unfair." Laura looked at her, seeing for the first time a vulnerability in the girl who had always seemed so self-assured. "I accept your apology." Bianca gave a small smile and walked away. They didn't become friends, but the hostility had been replaced by a quiet peace, and for Laura that was enough. While Laura was preparing for her university entrance exams, dreaming of studying psychology to work helping people, Mariana was completely fulfilled in her work at the Fresh Start Foundation. As the general coordinator of the employment and training programs across the Foundation's 3 centers, Mariana had become a respected figure in the field. She was invited to give talks, interviewed for television programs, and participated in conferences on social welfare. But she never lost her humility, never forgot where she came from. Every family that came through the Foundation was treated with the same care, the same dignity she had received. Mariana made a point of personally knowing each story, of looking into the eyes of every desperate mother and saying, "I know what you're feeling, because I've been there, but it will pass. You will get through this," and they did. Over the past 5 years, more than 1,200 families had been helped by the Fresh Start Foundation. 1,200 stories of transformation, of fresh starts, of restored hope. Edward, now 51, had become nationally known not just as a successful businessman, but as a dedicated philanthropist. The Fresh Start Foundation was his greatest pride, more important than any business he had built. He continued to follow Laura and Mariana's progress closely. He had become a sort of father figure to Laura, always present at important moments. When she won the Student of the Year award at her college, Edward was in the audience applauding emotionally. When she published her first article on social inequality in a youth magazine, Edward was the first to congratulate her. One November morning, Edward called a special meeting at the Foundation's main headquarters. Besides Mariana and the permanent staff, he had invited Laura, Patricia, Gabriel, and several other families who had been helped over the years. When everyone was gathered in the large hall that had once been an abandoned warehouse and was now a welcoming space full of life, Edward took to the small stage. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here on this very special day." Edward looked around, seeing familiar faces, stories of overcoming transformed lives. Today marks exactly 5 years since the official inauguration of the Fresh Start Foundation. 5 years of hard work, many challenges, but above all, many victories. The attendees applauded. "In these 5 years, we have helped over 1,200 families. We have offered more than 3,000 job placements. We have served over 200,000 meals. We have conducted over 15,000 medical consultations. We have run hundreds of vocational training courses." Edward paused, moved. "These are impressive numbers, but more important than the numbers are the stories, the lives that have changed, the children who now have a future, the mothers who have regained hope." Mariana, sitting in the front row next to Laura, discreetly wiped away a tear. "And all of this began with a very specific story," Edward continued, looking directly at Laura. "The story of a 12-year-old girl who, on a rainy day, did something wrong out of desperation. But when she was confronted, she didn't run from responsibility. She cried, asked for forgiveness, and made a promise. She promised she would never do it again, and she kept it." Laura felt her face grow warm. She hadn't expected to be the center of attention. "Laura, could you come up here, please?" Laura looked at Mariana, who nodded encouragingly. She stood up and walked to the stage, feeling all eyes on her. Edward put a hand on her shoulder. "This young woman taught me something I had forgotten. She taught me that small acts of kindness can change everything, that everyone deserves a second chance, that dignity is not a luxury, it's a right, and she inspired me to create all of this." He gestured to the hall, to the people gathered there. "But the story doesn't end there," Edward smiled. "Laura didn't just receive help, she passed it on. She became a volunteer at the Foundation at 15, helping children with their schoolwork." She started a book donation project for community libraries, and most importantly, she became a living symbol that transformation is possible. Edward turned to Laura. "And for that, I want to give you something special." He gave a signal and Regina appeared carrying a frame covered with a cloth. When the cloth was removed, everyone could see. It was a beautiful painting of an outstretched hand holding a loaf of bread, the foundation's symbol with a phrase underneath. Laura read the phrase aloud, her voice trembling. "A promise that changed everything. In honor of Laura Walker, whose courage to start anew inspired thousands." Tears began to stream down Laura's face. She looked at Edward, speechless. "This painting will be permanently displayed at the entrance of all our centers," Edward explained, "so that every person who arrives here knows that no matter what they did in the past, what matters is what they choose to do from now on." Laura hugged Edward, crying. Thank you for everything." "It is I who should thank you," Edward whispered. "You saved much more than just yourself that day. You saved me too." When Laura came down from the stage, she was immediately embraced by Mariana. Mother and daughter held each other for long minutes, crying together, remembering everything they had been through, where they had started and where they had arrived. After the ceremony, there was a festive lunch. It was a moment of celebration, of fellowship between the families who had been helped, and who now, many of them, worked as volunteers helping others. It was then that Laura saw a scene that deeply moved her. Deborah, the woman Mariana had helped years ago, and who now worked as an assistant at the foundation, was talking to a newly arrived mother, a woman who was crying desperately while holding a baby in her arms. "I understand what you're feeling," Deborah was saying, her voice firm but gentle. "I've been exactly where you are. No home, no job, no hope. But look at me now. I have a steady job. My daughter is in a good school. We have our own flat. And you will get there too. I'm going to help you." The woman looked at Deborah with the same expression Deborah had given Mariana years ago. Distrust mixed with desperation, mixed with a tiny spark of hope. Laura watched the scene with a heavy heart. This was exactly it. This was how kindness multiplied. One person helped another, who helped another, who helped another. An infinite cycle of transformation and hope. Rafaela, her friend from school, who had become a volunteer at the foundation after Laura invited her, appeared beside her. "It's moving, isn't it, to see all this?" "It's more than moving," Laura replied. "It's miraculous to think it all started with a bag of soggy bread." "You never told me the full story," Rafaela said. "Just that Mr. Williams helped you. But what really happened?" Laura looked around at all those people, all those stories, all that love and hope concentrated in one place, and she decided to tell her. They sat in a quiet corner, and Laura recounted everything. The hunger, her sick mother, the desperation that led her to steal those rolls, the encounter with Edward, the shame, the fear, and finally the promise to never do it again, to never have to do it again. Rafaela listened in silence with tears in her eyes. When Laura finished, she hugged her friend tightly. "You are the bravest person I know," Rafaela said. "Not because you stole when you were desperate, but because you owned your mistake, asked for forgiveness, and turned it into something bigger." "I didn't do anything special," Laura replied sincerely. "I just promised to try to be better, and I had help, a lot of help. And now you help others. That's the cycle." As the sun began to set, painting the London sky with shades of orange and pink, Edward called Mariana and Laura for a private conversation in his office at the foundation. "I want to talk to you about the future," he began, sitting behind the simple but functional desk. "Laura, you're finishing your A-levels this year. Have you decided what you want to do?" "I want to study psychology," Laura answered without hesitation. "I want to work helping people who go through trauma, through difficulties. I want to make a difference in their lives." Edward smiled. "I thought so. And you know we have a university scholarship program at the foundation, right?" "I know, but—" "No buts," Edward interrupted gently. "You will have a full scholarship to any university you choose. And what's more, I want to offer you a paid internship here at the foundation while you study. You can work part-time, helping with the psychological support for the assisted families. It will be valuable practical experience." Laura looked at Mariana, who was beaming with pride. Mr. Williams, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You just need to keep being who you are. And in the future, when you've graduated, I hope you'll consider working here officially. We're going to need psychologists specializing in trauma and social vulnerability. I will, Laura promised. I want to do this. I want to help other children the way I was helped. Edward nodded, satisfied. Then he turned to Mariana. And you, Mariana, have done exceptional work. The 3 centers are running perfectly under your coordination. The families adore you. The team respects you. You've become a natural leader. Mariana blushed. I try to do my best. And you do much more than that. Edward leaned forward. That's why I want to make you a proposal. We're planning to expand nationally. Open Fresh Start Foundation centers in other major cities, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Cardiff. And we're going to need a national director of social programs, someone who understands the foundation's philosophy, who has practical experience, who knows how to train and lead teams. Mariana's eyes widened. Mr. Williams, it's the next step, Edward smiled. You're ready. More than ready. Mariana looked at Laura, who nodded enthusiastically. Mum, you were born to do this. I accept, Mariana said, her voice firm despite her emotion. I will give my all to do this job right. I know you will. That night, when they returned home, mother and daughter stood on the small balcony of their flat, looking out at the illuminated city below. Do you remember that day, Mum? Laura asked softly. The day I took those roles? How could I forget? Mariana put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. It was the worst and the best day of our lives. Why the best? Because it was the day everything started to change. The day I realized how strong you were. The day Mr. Williams appeared and showed us there was still kindness in the world. I was so scared that day, Laura confessed. When he caught me, I thought my life was over, that I'd be arrested, that you'd be disappointed in me, that I'd never be able to look at myself in the mirror again. And I was so scared of losing you. Mariana tightened her hug. Scared you'd be taken from me, that we'd be separated. But instead, we were given an angel. He's not an angel, Mum. He's just a good person. Maybe that's the same thing. They stood in silence, for a moment, just watching the city, thinking about everything they had been through, all the battles won, all the moments of desperation that had been transformed into opportunities. Mum, Laura said after a while, do you think we made a difference? A real one? Mariana looked at her daughter tenderly. Laura, we've changed over 1,000 lives. You don't think that's making a difference? That's not what I mean, Laura tried to explain. I know the foundation has helped a lot of people, but I mean us, you and me, did we make a difference? Mariana turned Laura to face her directly. Sweetheart, listen to me carefully. We were 2 broken people without hope, without a future. And today you're about to go to university. I'm a national director of social programs. We have a decent life, a welcoming home, food on the table, dreams for the future. And most importantly, we use what we've lived through to help others. If that's not making a difference, I don't know what is. Laura hugged her mother, feeling complete in a way she had never felt before. I love you, Mum. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world. The months passed, and Laura dedicated herself intensely to her university entrance exams. Her grades had always been excellent, but she wanted to ensure she would be accepted into a top university. Rafaela studied with her, and the 2 had become inseparable friends. One afternoon, while studying in the Foundation's library, Gabriel appeared. Now 15, tall and strong, he was in his first year of A-levels and also dreamed of university. Laura, can you help me with physics? I don't understand anything about thermodynamics. Laura smiled. Of course, come here. As she explained the concepts to Gabriel, she realized something beautiful. There she was who had been helped, now helping another who had also been helped. And Gabriel, in the future, would help others. And so the cycle would continue, infinitely, multiplying kindness and opportunity. In December, Laura sat her exams for psychology at University College London. The exams were difficult, but she felt confident. She had studied, she was prepared, and most importantly, She knew exactly why she wanted this. The results came out in January. Laura was at home when the website was updated. With trembling hands, she typed in her application number and waited for the page to load. When she saw her name on the list of successful applicants, she let out a cry of joy. Mariana came running from the bedroom. "What is it? Did something happen?" "I got in, Mum. I got in." Laura jumped radiant. "I'm going to UCL. I'm going to study psychology." Mariana hugged her daughter and they jumped together, laughing and crying with happiness. It was another victory, another dream realized, another proof that transformation was possible. Edward, when he heard the news, called immediately. "Laura, my congratulations. I knew you could do it. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for everything, for believing in me from the very beginning. Laura, I only opened the door. You were the one who walked through it." On the day of university registration in February, Edward insisted on accompanying Laura and Mariana. The three of them walked together through the immense UCL campus, admiring the buildings, the trees, the rushing students. "This is where you'll spend the next few years," Edward said, looking around, "studying, growing, preparing to make a difference in the world." Laura looked at the man who had completely changed her life. "Mr. Williams, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why? Why did you do all of this for me? For us?" Edward was silent for a moment, thoughtful. "You know, Laura, when I found you that day, I saw something in you that I had lost. I saw pure courage, unconditional love, unshakable dignity, even in the midst of desperation. And it reminded me of who I was before I became a businessman, before I became rich. It reminded me of the boy who also went hungry, who also saw his mother suffer, who also struggled." He looked up at the sky, as if searching for the right words. "I helped you because I needed to remember that success without purpose is empty, because I needed to find meaning for everything I had built. And you gave me that. You gave me a purpose. You gave me the chance to be more than a businessman. You gave me the chance to be human again." Laura hugged Edward, crying. "You are the most incredible person I know." Edward returned the hug. "And you are the reason I wake up every day wanting to be better." The welcome ceremony for new students was emotional. Laura was among hundreds of new students, all anxious, nervous, excited. When the head of the department asked students to briefly introduce themselves, Laura raised her hand. "My name is Laura Walker. I'm 17 and I came from a state school. I want to study psychology to help people who go through difficult situations, who need support, who need to believe they can start over. Because I know it's possible. I am living proof of it." Her classmates applauded, and Laura felt a wave of belonging. Here, in this place, she wasn't the poor girl or the scholarship student. She was simply Laura, a young woman, with dreams, with talent, with a future. In the following months, Laura dedicated herself intensely to her university studies while working part-time at the foundation. It was tiring, but rewarding. In her classes, she learned theories about human development, trauma, resilience. At work, she saw these theories come to life, applied to families who were struggling to survive and start anew. One of her tasks at the foundation was to provide basic psychological support to the children they served. Under the supervision of an experienced psychologist, Laura talked with boys and girls who carried weights on their shoulders that they shouldn't have to bear. And every time she saw a child with that look of fear and desperation that she herself had once had, Laura remembered the promise she had made 5 years ago, holding a bag of bread in the rain. Never again would that child have to steal to eat. Never again would they have to choose between hunger and honesty. Because here, at the Fresh Start Foundation, there was food, there was help, there was hope, and Laura was helping to ensure it. In May of that year, the Fresh Start Foundation celebrated its 6th anniversary. To celebrate, Edward organized a special event, a gala night to raise funds for the national expansion. The event would be at a prestigious London hotel, attended by business people, artists, politicians, and opinion leaders. Laura was nervous when Edward invited her. She had never been to such a sophisticated event, but Mariana encouraged her. "You deserve to be there as much as anyone else," her mother said. "You are an essential part of this story." On the day of the event, Laura wore a simple but elegant dress that Mariana had bought especially for the occasion. When she arrived at the hotel, she was impressed by the grandeur of the place: huge chandeliers, impeccable decor, waiters circulating with glasses of champagne. Edward greeted her at the entrance. "You look beautiful, Laura." "Thank you, and thank you for inviting me." "You are the star of the night," Edward smiled. "Without you, none of this would exist." During dinner, Edward took to the stage to give a speech. The hall fell silent. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here on this very important night," Edward began. "You are here to support the Fresh Start Foundation, an organization that, for the past 6 years, has been changing lives and restoring hope. But before I talk about numbers and future projects, I want to tell a story." He paused dramatically. 6 years ago, on a rainy afternoon, I found a 12-year-old girl trying to steal bread. She was desperate, hungry, trying to care for her sick mother, and when she was discovered, instead of running or making excuses, she cried, asked for forgiveness, and made a promise. She promised she would never do it again. The hall was completely silent. Edward continued, "That girl taught me something fundamental. That one, mistake does not define a person. That everyone deserves a second chance. That kindness can transform lives. And she inspired me to create the Fresh Start Foundation, based on this simple yet powerful philosophy." He looked directly at Laura. "That girl is here tonight. She is no longer a desperate child. She is a brilliant university student, studying psychology at UCL, working as an intern at the foundation, helping hundreds of other children who are going through what she went through. Laura Walker, could you come up here, please?" Laura felt all eyes turned to her. With her heart pounding, she stood up and walked to the stage. Edward put his arm around her shoulders. "This is Laura, the inspiration for everything we do, and tonight she is going to tell her story, in her own words." He handed the microphone to Laura and stepped down from the stage. Laura looked at the audience full of important, well-dressed, powerful people. She felt a moment of panic, but then she saw Mariana, sitting at one of the front tables, nodding encouragingly. She saw Rafaela, she saw Patricia, she saw Gabriel, she saw Deborah. She saw all the people who had been transformed, who had been given a second chance. And she knew what she needed to say. "Good evening, my name is Laura Walker. I'm 17 years old, and 6 years ago I committed a crime." A murmur went through the hall. "I stole 4 rolls from a bakery," Laura continued, her voice firm. "Not because I was bad or because I had no values, but because I was desperate. My mother was sick, unable to work. We had no food. We had nothing. And I was a 12-year-old child trying to keep my mother alive." The people were completely captivated. "When I was discovered, I thought my life was over, that I would be arrested, that I would lose my mother, that I would never be able to forgive myself. But instead, I found Mr. Williams, and he gave me something that changed everything. It wasn't just the food, although that was important. It wasn't just the medical help for my mother, although that was essential. It was dignity. It was a second chance. It was the message that I mattered, that my life had value, that my mistake did not define me." Laura paused, feeling the tears begin to fall. "And on that day I promised that I would never do it again. I promised that I would never steal again, never have to steal again, and I kept my promise. But more than that, I learned something fundamental, that when you receive love and kindness, you don't just keep it for yourself, you pass it on." She looked around the hall. The Fresh Start Foundation is not about charity, it's about dignity. It's about giving people not a handout that humiliates, but an opportunity that uplifts. It's about saying to every desperate family, "You matter, you deserve it, you can do it." And in the last 6 years, more than 1,500 families have heard that message, and their lives have changed. The applause began, but Laura raised her hand. "I'm not finished," she said, smiling through her tears. "I want to ask something of all of you. When you leave here tonight, don't just think about making a donation, although that is important and necessary. Think about how you can multiply kindness. Maybe it's helping a family that is going through a hard time. Maybe it's giving a job opportunity to someone who needs it. Maybe it's simply looking with compassion at that person on the street instead of looking away. She looked at Edward. Because small acts of kindness can change everything. I am living proof of that. And every family that comes through the foundation is too. Laura descended from the stage to thunderous applause. Several people were visibly moved, discreetly wiping away tears. Mariana hugged her daughter tightly. You were perfect, so perfect. That night, the Fresh Start Foundation raised over £2 million in donations. Enough not only to open the planned centres in other cities, but to expand existing programs, to hire more professionals, to help even more families, and all because a 17-year-old girl had the courage to tell her truth, to admit her mistake, to share her transformation. When Laura got home that night, it was almost midnight. She took off the elegant dress, put on comfortable pajamas, and went out onto the balcony. The city was quiet, illuminated by thousands of lights. Mariana appeared beside her, bringing 2 cups of tea. Can't sleep. I'm still processing everything. Laura accepted the cup. It was so intense. You touched a lot of people tonight, Mariana said. I saw people crying. It's strange, you know? Laura looked up at the starry sky. When I took those roles, I thought I was at my lowest point. I thought I had become the worst person in the world. But now I realize that moment brought me here. It made me who I am. It wasn't the mistake that made you who you are, Mariana corrected gently. It was what you did afterwards. It was the promise you made and kept. It was the courage to accept help. It was the generosity to pass on what you received. Laura nodded, thoughtful. Mum, do you think we've paid our debt yet? To Mr. Williams. Mariana smiled. Sweetheart, there was never a debt. Edward always made that clear. But if you're asking if we've returned the kindness we received, I'd say we're just getting started. Every family we help, every life we touch, every person we inspire to be better, that's continuing the cycle. It's not paying a debt. It's multiplying love. The two of them stood there on the balcony, drinking tea and talking about the future. About Laura's dreams at university. About Mariana's plans to expand the foundation nationally. About all the lives they could still change. And when they finally went to sleep, they both felt a deep peace, the peace of knowing they were on the right path, that they were making a difference, that they had transformed pain into purpose. 6 years after that rainy day, Laura was no longer the scared girl holding a bag of bread. She was a strong, intelligent, compassionate young woman. She was someone who knew the value of a second chance because she had been given one. And now she dedicated her life to ensuring that others had that chance too. The promise she had made. That day was no longer just about never stealing again. It had transformed into something much bigger. It was a promise to live with integrity, to use her experiences to help others, to never forget where she came from, to always extend a hand to those in need. And that promise, simple but powerful, had changed not just 3 lives but thousands. It had created a foundation. It had inspired a movement. It had proven that transformation is possible, that kindness multiplies, that love wins. And it had all started with a girl, a mother, and a man who chose to believe that everyone deserves a second chance.